So now we proceed to the open forum. We will just we will take 3 questions at a time. So oops, we have 5 minutes to 5. So I think we can stay for a little bit of 15 minutes. I think for the question and answer. I think because you have been very inspired by the presentations of our 2 distinguished gentlemen. Okay? Yes, ma'am. Other questions? Okay, while waiting for the other questions, please stand up and identify yourself, your organization and affiliation, and to whom you are addressing the question.
Okay, I'm Gwendolyn Bambalan, but you may call me Mutia. I'm from the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, particularly the Forest Management Bureau. I would like to extend my appreciation to the 3 presenters for the enlightening presentation. But I have 2 questions. And the first question is directed to Dr. Lance or Lange?
Lange.
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 Okay, I really appreciated your presentation because you mentioned about gender sensitivity as a criteria or characteristics of the forest land use planning that you somehow initiated in Silago Leyte. But my question is, what are the basic considerations that you used in defining the uses of the land? And you mentioned about participation, so was there a conflict between what the community wants and the appropriate use of the land based from its topographic and physical attributes? And my second question is directed to the 2 presenters from the local government units, particularly to Mr. Tito Fortes, because you mentioned about categorizing low, moderate, and high-risk areas. I'm just wondering, you did not mention about the geohazard mapping that our agency is giving you, giving the local government units. Have you considered this in your planning for your disaster risk management? And if you have some recommendations on how we can improve the mapping attributes so that it will be more useful to the local government units. Thank you.
Only 2 questions? Okay. Another question from the floor? Okay, they are still thinking.
Thank you very much for the questions. Basic considerations of uses of lands. For the upland areas, this follows the prescribed zoning or forest land uses of DNR. There's 2 zones, protection zone and production zone, and there is a community-based, in this case, there's a community-based forestry management area that is predefined. That somehow cuts a little bit across the protection and the production zone. There's a natural reserve, Mount Nakula. This is a critical watershed that crosses actually several municipalities. So this was observed based actually on the existing land classification of DNR. So I think the innovation is to map it. To clearly map it, not to look at forest land as a big gray area, but to differentiate the various types of uses that are existing within the forest lands. There are actually quite a couple of settlements as well within the forest lands. Formalized settlements, there are barangays. There's also spread out settlements in some areas. People are actually paying taxes for those areas. And so you somehow have to deal with this when you do your participatory process. And of course it's not easy, of course there are conflicts. And of course you cannot kick out people from area where they used to stay for decades, where the city is actually, the municipality is actually collecting real property taxes. So you have to deal with these things and you cannot do it overnight. And the approach is to, first of all, maintain the status quo, but to try to balance this with the needs. And I think the most critical element here certainly is the protection zone. And I think the challenge here is now, when it comes to the management side, for the municipality to come to an agreement with the DNR, what will be the allowed uses within the protection and the production zone. So what kind of agroforestry, what kind of forest management also within the protection zone is going to be allowed, because any kind of forest, regardless whether it's protection or production forest, has to be managed. You have to plant, you have to cut, you have to manage it, otherwise it's not going to work. So this has to be figured out now, and I think they're on a good way discussing this with DNR, since DNR was involved when they did the FLUP. So the FLUP is actually in place and fully integrated into the CLUP. And regarding the conflicts, I think the conflicts are more in terms of boundary conflicts or conflicts with neighboring municipalities, not so much in terms what are the prescribed uses. Of course you have issues of illegal practices, slash and burn, etc. But these are the usual things. Of course they have to be addressed, and the ordinance would be the regulatory tool for the LGU to make sure that these things do not happen. But as we all know, it's a challenge. You have to have the necessary enforcement practices in place. On the other hand, in terms of incentives, it's also going to be a challenge, because you have to give the people something. So enforcement alone will not do. There have to be incentives, and that's what the LGU is currently figuring out, how to keep people, how to make people comply with the prescribed uses. That's going to be a long and painful process, and that will only work together with the respective agencies. And there will have to be compromises in terms of what is allowed and what is not allowed, and how far can also the DNR, let's say, compromise on a certain allowable use, even within certain areas where usually you would say there's just a protection area. That's it. So that's going to be very challenging, given all kind of settlements you have there, including relocations of sites for DAR beneficiaries, agrarian reform beneficiaries. So it's going to be very challenging. So that's actually just the beginning.
Okay. Regarding the hazard map, kindly flash the slide. The one with the cross. I think I mentioned this in my presentation, that while we have the existing CLUP, the process is more visualized, like putting another layer or superimposing on the existing land use map the combined hazards map provided to us by the appropriate agencies. Among them are the Pag-asa, the OSD, and this is also what we used in our vulnerability and adaptation assessment study. And corresponding policies, regulations, and climate change resiliency are added to these allowable land uses. So I just don't have the map here on the specified hazard zone and the low risk, the medium risk, but I think they are in your USB provided by the Secretariat. Thank you.
Other questions from the floor? No other question? Or should I ask a question? Okay, Dr. Sarah Breckley from the University of Manchester, UK. Could you kindly approach the microphone?
Hello, thank you for the papers. It was an informational question really. I was wondering whether you were using any financial techniques to do sort of biodiversity banking or biodiversity offsets or ecosystem services using any of the handbooks that are available internationally. I'm not suggesting that you should do this necessarily. RED Plus as well. Can you just give a bit of information about whether you're looking to use RED Plus as a forestry preservation system? Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, we have RED Plus. There is actually a RED Plus program funded by the German government with DNR. That's also actually working in the area I presented, but I just wanted to focus on my approach that I wanted to give. But yes, GIZ is assisting RED Plus, and there are 5 pilot sites right now in southern Leyte where they're currently undergoing forest land use planning, and hopefully by the end of this year the financial mechanism, or let's say the readiness of those municipalities will be such that some financial mechanisms can be started right away. What we're trying to do, I mentioned earlier the issue of compliance of people living in protected areas and the issue of incentives. So we're trying to, we're currently working on a concept, we call it environmental conditional cash transfers. That's somehow a mix between conditional cash transfers and payment for environmental services. I think that goes into the direction of your question, to use that, to use this kind of concept in order to provide incentives to communities who follow certain regulations, say no slash and burn practices, a certain type of agroforestry, certain type of forest protection, and but this is quite at the conceptual stage right now. But I think probably for the Philippine context, I mean, looking at the vast issue of upland population, there has to be some sort of incentive system, and system that allows to put into value what this population is doing for forest lands. That will probably in the future be very important. So payment for environmental services, I think it's going to be a very, very crucial context, probably along with other instruments like RED Plus, although I think we still will have to see how this is actually going to work. I think there are quite a couple of issues right now. But yeah, we do look at it, but it's still at least for the payment for environmental services, it's still at a very early stage. I know only a few places. I think WOW in Mindanao has done that. There's a few examples under EcoGov, under the US-funded program where this was piloted, but I think the experiences there are not that many yet. So that would be very interesting to develop this further. And actually, the ECCT I mentioned is together with the SWD. This is something we're currently endeavoring on, along with our partners from the National Convergence Initiative.
Okay, let me ask a question to our 2 gentlemen from the Guban City and Sorsogon. I think this is very important. Okay, let me ask my question first, and then I can call you. Okay, would you consider, because Sorsogon City has been hailed as one of those with best practices in climate change adaptation, and the Guban City as it's one of these villages has been awarded with best in disaster risk reduction. Would you consider your LGUs already as climate resilient or climate proof? I think this has to be understood by many. Okay, so both our LGU guests can answer that, and then your question, sir.
Actually, this is not a question but a request. I'm Elmar Panopio from LGU Mabini, Batangas, where Anilao is located. And a request to Colonel Mata. We are now revising our coastal resource management ordinance, and I understand flash on the screen is a coastal fisheries or coastal resource management. Yes. I wonder how we can get a copy of your ordinance. So
we will send you, sir. We will send you. We'll just get your address and we will send you by DH.
Thank you very much. Thank you.